if I'm, as the shareholder, incentivize someone to essentially 20x my investment over the course of 5 years, I'm more than happy to pay that person, to reward them with double their current ownership of the same stock. Farzad had a really great show with a guy named Richard Hoffman, who's a lawyer, that really went into the details. If people want to really understand what it was that happened, that was a great show. But so I wanted to just point out that there's a difference between voided and what actually happened. So voided is not what the judge did. He rescinded the package, which basically means that we're hypothetically trying to go back in time and say, okay, we're going to pretend this never happened, and now we have to redo everything all over again. And so in order for Tesla to comply with their actions, they would have to make it much more clear to all of the shareholders exactly what the relationship of Elon is to all the board members if they're going to propose a new plan. So there's possibilities for Tesla to do that. Tesla obviously can also appeal. I think this is a terrible move by the judge. I think that, we've already seen Tesla saying, hey, we're going to get out of Delaware, we're going to move. And from what I've seen on Twitter, a lot of companies and other people who just had it in their mind because it was standard practice that we're going to incorporate in Delaware, that overnight has dramatically shifted. And it's no longer going to be the default for especially tech companies and people in Silicon Valley. We know that everyone in Silicon Valley really looks at Elon as a business leader. What he did in just cutting deeply at Twitter was something that then had ripple effects throughout the rest of the industry. And I think this is going to be the same thing for Delaware. I think that they're going to lose a ton of corporate business in the state of Delaware. And I think they have a relatively low corporate tax rate for the state, but they have a large share of corporations that are incorporated there. And so I think they have very large corporate tax earnings that they bring in for such a small state. And I think that's basically, we just went through an inflection point that's going to be on the downward trend instead of the upward trend. And a lot of these other up and coming jurisdictions like Texas or Florida, other areas are going to end up getting a lot larger share because the one thing that investors and boards and companies hate is uncertainty. And the one thing that this ruling did was 10x'd the amount of uncertainty that executives, officers, and board members have on corporate, large corporate boards or large corporate companies that are publicly traded. And so, just because they don't want to expose themselves to that added risk now, people are going to be fleeing Delaware.
Joe, did you have some thoughts?
Yeah, that's crazy. That's something I didn't actually think about. And knowing that, man, wow, that's something else. My view is more of a broader view. I just looking at what the board was trying to do, you realize that they do want to pay Elon Musk, and that was my whole take. I didn't really care about anything else. I figured okay, well, they're going to find a way because they want to do this. So that was my broader take on all of it. Yeah, the stock price is one thing, but knowing that the board of directors is actually trying to compensate him was my big takeaway. But man, I feel sorry for Delaware corporate tax. That's crazy.
Yeah, I think my thought is more of, really, it's going to be, one thing that could get into an interesting discussion is obviously Elon knows a lot more of what's going on because he's, talking with his lawyers. But what is Elon's thinking? Again, this obviously, I think this is going to be, they're going to try to appeal this or, correct this because it's a huge fallout. But this is at least, I think, what other CEO has ever had a comp plan that is completely based off of the market cap of a company, or more importantly, with no guarantees and, for stock or even, an annual salary. And then even take, the past 2 years, the guy hasn't also been paid as well. So now you're removing something that was set up in 2018 and, making a judgment now as if we were still in 2018 is just pretty ridiculous. Especially, I think, again, you guys keep me honest here, part of the reason for the, I guess the correct term isn't void, rescinded the comp plan was because, the shareholders didn't know if Elon controlled the board or not, or something like that. Right. But at the end of the day, that's the guy that I want controlling the board. That's the guy that I want, the visionary of this company, probably the greatest mind of our lifetime, if not the greatest engineering mind or entrepreneur that ever lived. He's the guy that everyone is investing, into Tesla, SpaceX, and X and XAI and Boring, all these companies. I mean, this, people are following this guy. The talent is coming to Tesla. This place is harder to get into than Harvard and Yale to get a job at Tesla and SpaceX. They're coming there because Elon's there. And my opinion is that, and I think, again, you keep me honest, feel free to fact check me. I thought I saw some tweet out there where, the judge had made a comment on how much time he was spending at Tesla. And I think that was really like kind of a low blow, because at the end of the day, you want Elon focused on the most important projects. I don't want him focused on expense report. I don't want him focused on supply chain. I want him focused on autopilot and full self-driving and potentially some manufacturing, because you don't have, that's like what he's great at. Obviously he's great at a lot of other things, but you don't want to him focused on operations. And so my opinion is that, Hans, you brought up a ton of great points on, the fallout potentially of a lot of these tech companies or companies that incorporate there. But really, it's in some ways, it's the feeling is that like the government is controlling capitalism or overstepping in a lot of ways. And I just think that this is a lot of unneeded distractions for Elon. What this guy needs to be focused on is, obviously continue all of his companies. And obviously he's going to continue to be vocal about, his beliefs, but focusing on something that happened literally 6-7 years ago. And then now he's got to go back. This is just like, in my opinion, this is just a huge setback for that, because who knows how long this appeal process is or how long it'll take to potentially get the comp plan on the shareholder voting. And then even then, at that point, you still have to figure out what you're going to do for his future comp plan. So I just thought it was like, I was more probably frustrated that this is just going to be a distraction, something that's not needed, because he's already accomplished so much. Like, we need to be focused on, getting to a sustainable future, getting Starship up and running. And obviously you could say that about a lot of things, but I'm just saying it's just, this was just more of an annoyance than anything else. But what are your guys' thoughts on what I said, or also too on how Elon's taking this? Is this and how this may even impact Tesla in general?
One of the things that I think is important to note is just that, the reason that this comp package is something that is so supported by most shareholders, and why a lot of, at least the long-term shareholders, are very upset with the ruling, is that the incentives were aligned so well. I think that Elon roughly doubled his percentage ownership in the company in return for doing a 19x on the stock. And so if I'm, as the shareholder, can incentivize someone to essentially 20x my investment over the course of 5 years, I'm more than happy to pay that person, to reward them with double their current ownership of the same stock. And for the court to basically take it upon themselves to find that this is an unfair way to do compensation, it is unprecedented. And so I understand why it was challenged, just because we don't have anything that says, yes, this is a good thing to do, because people don't normally do this, because let's be honest, most CEOs don't have the confidence that they can pull off something that crazy. And so, I enjoy, and when going back to the point that you were making earlier, the fact that he is willing to put himself on the line and forego any compensation if he cannot perform. Like, I like that as a shareholder, and I think that he is the best person for the job, and I want him to actually control the board. Like, one of the reasons that I am so invested in the company is because Elon is calling the shots. Anyone who is a tech investor that appreciates the power and the synergy that is possible of a founder-led company versus a company with some professional CEO. And, one of the big problems with those professional CEOs is A, they don't really have the vision, but really B, their compensation is not nearly as aligned. They get paid to keep an existing company from going down. They're like, insurance for board members and investors against downside risk more often then they are capable of providing huge returns. If you look at the history of public companies, founder-led companies do much better during their tenure than they do under the tenure of professional CEOs. And that's something that there are very few exceptions to. And so as a shareholder, I like that Elon has that amount of influence and control over the company. And I was fully aware that he was very tight with all the board and able to get a compensation package that, when I looked at it, said, you know what? If he gets that, that means that I have won massively. I'm okay with that. I was well informed. I don't need the judge to go back and tell me that I didn't understand the company that I was investing in. And yeah, I think that that's just ridiculous to 5 years later try and make that decision.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. Not only that, but who wants to run a company with their enemies? You know what I mean? Like realistically, like, no, I want my boys with me. You know what I mean? Like, I want people I can trust, people who we have a shared vision of aligned goals, and people like that. I don't know. Yeah, the whole thing is wild, man. Like, this dude has done more for like Tesla and his effect, where people like to admit it or not, his effect on all of corporate culture and just popular culture in general has an impact. Like, yeah, they might not like him, but they mention him every day. They talk about X every day. They talk about him every day. They talk about Tesla. You know what I mean? Like, but yet this company is nothing, and he's nothing, but he's on everybody's lips and in everybody's minds, occupying all their thoughts. So yeah,